Beneath the fractured dome of the lunar temple, where moonlight bled like silver veins through cracked stone, Aurea Bloodroot learned that solitude was the sharpest blade. The wind howled through the ruins like a pack of forsaken wolves, carrying the scent of pine and frost-bitten earth. Aurea huddled in the shadow of a toppled altar, her breath fogging the air in ragged bursts. At 28 winters, she bore the weight of exile like a second skin, scarred, unyielding, and invisible. The temple, once a sanctuary to the goddess's whispers, now lay in shattered reverence, its arches collapsed under the fury of a storm long past. Ivy clawed at the marble remnants, and snow drifted in through the breaches, blanketing the debris in a hush of white that muffled even her thoughts. She remembered the night they cast her out. The pack's fire had roared in the central clearing, flames leaping high as elders chanted invocations to the moon. Aurea had stood accused, her hands trembling not from fear, but from the tremor of power she could not contain. It had surged unbidden during a hunt, a rival wolf lunging for her throat, and in defense her will had uncoiled like roots from the frozen ground. She had hurled him back, not with claws or fangs, but with an invisible force that cracked ribs and splintered bone. The beast within her, they called it. An omega cursed, unfit for the harmony of the fold. Her alpha's eyes, once soft with promise, had hardened to ice. "You are no longer of us," he had declared, his voice cutting deeper than any exile's wound. They bound her wrists with silver-laced rope, the metal burning like accusations against her skin, and dragged her to the borderlands. There, amid the whispering pines, they left her with nothing but the clothes on her back and a warning. Return, and the pack would tear her apart as the monster she was. That was 3 years ago. Aurea had clawed her way to the temple ruins, drawn by an instinct she dared not name, a pull toward the sacred stones that hummed with the goddess's forgotten echoes. Here, in this forsaken cradle of moonlight, she survived. By day, she foraged the skeletal forests for roots and berries, her steps silent on the crust of snow. By night, she suppressed the gift that simmered in her blood, willing it dormant like a seed buried too deep to sprout. It was a fire she feared, hot and wild, threatening to consume not just her enemies, but the fragile peace of isolation. What strength was this if it branded her a beast? Better to be nothing, she told herself, wrapping her cloak tighter against the encroaching chill. Better to fade into the wind's lament than to risk the light that could shatter worlds. The temple's heart was a vast chamber, its ceiling a jagged maw open to the stars. Aurea had claimed a corner near a lingering brazier where embers from some ancient rite still smoldered faintly, casting flickering shadows on walls etched with lunar sigils. She knelt there now, grinding dried bloodroot between her palms, the plant that lent her name, its crimson sap a bitter reminder of the life force she guarded so fiercely. The root's tang filled her nostrils, sharp and metallic, mingling with the clean bite of snow. Her fingers, calloused and stained, moved with ritual precision. This was her anchor, the earth's quiet rebellion against the frost, much like her own buried defiance. But tonight, the moon hung low and bloated, its glow seeping through the cracks like an insistent gaze. Aurea felt it stir something within, a whisper at the edges of her mind, urging her to rise, to reach. She clenched her fists, nails biting into her palms until warm blood welled, dripping onto the snow-dusted floor. The droplets spread, dark and vital, steaming faintly in the cold. Blood was the goddess's ink, the elders had taught, writing fates in scarlet under the lunar eye. Aurea wiped it away, but the stain lingered on her skin, a cicatrix of what she denied. Far off, a howl pierced the night, not the triumphant cry of a hunt, but a lone, anguished keen that echoed her own isolation. The wind carried it closer, swirling flakes around her like spectral dancers. She rose, peering through a fissure in the wall. The forest beyond was a sea of white-capped evergreens, their branches bowing under the weight of winter. No pack scented the air, no eyes watched from the shadows. Yet the howl lingered, threading through her veins like a question. What if the beast was not a curse, but a call? Oria turned back to the brazier, feeding it a twist of bark. Flames licked upward, brief and hungry, illuminating the faint scar across her collarbone. A mark from the binding ropes, Silver's kiss that still ached in the moon's pull. She had chosen this exile, hadn't she? To suppress the power that terrified her, to trade connection for survival. But as the fire danced, casting her shadow long and wavering, doubt crept in like the frost. Strength was not in the strike, but in the restraint, the mercy of holding back when every instinct screamed to unleash. Yet mercy felt like chains, heavier than any rope. The wind gusted again, rattling the ruins, and Oria pressed her forehead to the cold stone. In the silence that followed, she whispered to the moon, "If I am beast, then let the wild claim me whole." The words hung unanswered as the night deepened, the temple's bones groaning under the weight of unspoken destinies. The howl shattered the night's fragile truce, drawing Oria from her vigil like a thread pulled taut. It came again, closer now, laced with a raw edge that spoke not of hunger, but of unraveling, a wolf's cry frayed by despair. She slipped from the temple's embrace, her boots crunching softly over the snow-sheathed stones, the cold seeping through her worn hides like fingers probing old wounds. The forest loomed beyond the ruins, its pines standing sentinel in the moon's pallid wash, branches etched black against the sky. She moved without thought, instinct overriding the caution 3 years had carved into her bones. What beast answered a beast's call? She did not know, only that the sound tugged at the buried fire in her chest, urging her forward into the white-veiled dark. The wind bit sharper here, whipping flakes against her cheeks, carrying the metallic tang of blood on its breath. Oria's scar throbbed in rhythm with her pulse, a silver-threaded reminder that power and pain were twins, inseparable. She crested a low ridge, the temple's silhouette fading behind her, and there, in a hollow ringed by frost-rimed boulders, she found him. He lay collapsed against a gnarled trunk, his form half buried in the drift. Furred cloak matted with crimson that bloomed dark against the snow. An alpha, by the breadth of his shoulders and the faint aura of command that clung to him even in defeat. A king dethroned by his own frailty. His chest heaved in labored draws, breath clouding the air, and one arm clutched a gash across his ribs, the wound ragged as if clawed by shadows rather than fangs. Oria froze, her heart slamming against her ribs like a caged thing. Alphas were storms incarnate, their presence a demand that bent the world to their will. This one reeked of the wild, pine sap, iron-rich blood, and something deeper, like the smoke of a dying hearth. His eyes, when they lifted to meet hers, were storm gray, shadowed by pain and a guilt that mirrored her own hidden fractures. He was no mere wanderer. A crown's echo lingered in the torque of hammered gold at his throat, etched with lunar crescents that caught the moonlight like captured stars. Yet he was broken, this king of the northern realms, his body a testament to betrayal's bite, fleeing, perhaps, from the very throne that should have shielded him. "Who?" His voice rasped, low and gravel-rough, as he tried to rise, only to slump back with a grimace. Blood seeped between his fingers, staining the snow in petals of red that steamed faintly, echoing the bloodroot she had ground earlier. Oria's gift stirred unbidden, a warm coil low in her belly, sensing the frayed threads of his life force. She could mend him. She knew, will the power forth like roots knitting earth, but the memory of her pack's rejection surged, hot and warning. To touch an alpha was to invite chains anew, to risk the beast they all feared. She stepped back, breath shallow, the wind tugging at her cloak like an insistent specter. Fear coiled with curiosity, a treacherous braid. "You trespass on forsaken ground," she said, her words steady despite the tremor in her limbs. "The ruins claim no guests. Leave before the cold does." But even as she spoke, her eyes traced the lines of him, the noble slant of his jaw, scarred faintly from battles long past, the way his gaze held not dominance, but a quiet plea, as if he carried the weight of a realm's sins on his broadening shoulders. He coughed, a wet sound that painted his lips with fresh scarlet, and extended his free hand, not in command, but in supplication. "I seek no claim, wanderer, only breath enough to outrun the shadows at my heels." His voice carried the timbre of counsels and war cries, yet laced with melancholy, a king haunted by duties unmet. Oria caught the flicker of it in his eyes. Guilt, etched deep as the canyons of the northern peaks, for choices that had cost lives, for a crown forged in blood he could not wash clean. An unseen enemy, he did not say, but she felt it in the air, the distant rumble of thunder that was no storm, the acrid whisper of invasion creeping from the borders. Instinct warred within her, the connection sparked, primal and unwelcome, a pull like the moon on tides, drawing her nearer despite the denial screaming in her mind. She was no savior. She was the monster they had cast out, her strength a curse that isolated rather than bound. Yet curiosity bloomed amid the fear, fragile as a flame in frost. What drove a king to crawl into exile's maw? She knelt, hesitant, the snow soaking through her knees, and pressed her palm to the earth beside him. The ground hummed faintly, responding to her touch, but she held the power leashed, offering only a strip of cloth from her cloak to staunch his wound. His fingers brushed hers as he took it, rough and warm against her chilled skin, sending a jolt through her like lightning over ice. "You bear the scent of the temple's grace," he murmured, eyes searching hers with an intensity that peeled back her defenses. "Why hide in shadows when the moon calls you forth?" Oria pulled away, the contact lingering like a brand. "The moon calls many to ruin," she replied, voice edged with the old hurt. "And I am no grace, only a survivor of what it destroys." She rose, turning toward the ruins, but paused as another howl echoed, not his, but distant, a pack's pursuit threading through the trees. Enemy or ally, it mattered not. The night closed in, wolves at the edges of their fragile solitude. He struggled to his feet, leaning on the tree, his gaze a tether she could not sever. Then let this survivor guide a fallen king to shelter, for one night, against the storm. The words hung between them, a bridge of fear and unspoken need, as the wind wailed its ancient dirge. In that moment, amid the swirling snow and the blood's warm promise, Oria felt the first crack in her isolation's armor, not love, but the raw curiosity of two exiles recognizing their shared fracture. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The ruins swallowed them whole, a labyrinth of fallen pillars and snow-choked arches that whispered of forgotten oaths to the goddess. Oria led the way, her steps measured against the crunch of fresh powder, the Alpha's labored breaths echoing hers like a shadowed duet. His name, he had murmured in the hollow, Cale Dravenfrost, last of the Silver Crown line, a king whose throne teetered on the edge of oblivion. The revelation hung between them, unspoken now, as heavy as the torque at his throat. She glanced back once, catching the flicker of pain in his storm-gray eyes, the way his free hand gripped the bloodied cloth she had given him, pressing it to the gash that wept crimson onto the pristine white. The temple's inner sanctum beckoned, its vast chamber a vault of fractured moonlight, where the air hung thick with the scent of ancient incense and damp stone. Oria pushed aside a curtain of icicles dangling from the threshold, their chime like brittle laughter in the wind's howl. Inside, the brazier she had tended earlier smoldered low, embers pulsing like a weary heart. She guided Kale to the alcove she called her own, a nest of furs scavenged from winter's leavings, piled against a wall etched with faded lunar runes that glowed faintly under the moon's gaze. He sank onto them with a suppressed groan, his broad frame folding as if the weight of his crown pressed him earthward. Blood dotted the furs, dark blooms that mirrored the bloodroot stains on her palms, a scarlet thread binding their wounds in ways neither dared acknowledge. "You should not have come," Aurea said, kneeling to stoke the fire. Her voice was a low murmur, edged with the frost of caution, but her hands moved with unbidden care, feeding the flames twigs and bark until they crackled to life. Warmth bloomed, chasing the chill from the air, casting golden flickers across his face, highlighting the deep lines of guilt carved there, the faint scars that spoke of battles where mercy had been a luxury he could ill afford. Kale's gaze followed her, intense yet restrained, as if he sensed the tremor in her gift, the power she leashed like a feral thing. "And you should not aid a stranger who reeks of ruin," he replied, his tone gravel rough, but laced with a quiet reverence. He shifted, wincing as the movement tugged at his ribs, the metallic tang of his blood mingling with the smoke. "Yet here we are, two ghosts in the goddess's graveyard." His words carried the melancholy of a man who had commanded legions, only to watch them fracture under the blade of betrayal. Whispers of an unseen enemy had pursued him from the capital. Shadow wraiths born of rival alphas, poisoning the borders with sorcery that twisted loyalties and sowed discord. Kale had fled not in cowardice, but to spare his realm the sight of their king's fall, his heart scarred by the lives he had failed to shield. Aurea tore a strip from her own cloak, dipping it in a bowl of melted snow warmed by the fire. The water steamed faintly as she approached, hesitation coiling in her chest like the wind outside. Touching him meant risking the surge, the beast they had named her, the force that could knit flesh or shatter stone. But the distant howls grew insistent, threading through the night like veins of ice, a pack not of wolves, but of something fouler, drawn by the scent of royal blood. Common foes, she realized, her isolation cracking under the shared threat. The enemy at the borders did not discriminate. It devoured the forsaken as readily as the crowned. She pressed the cloth to his wound, her fingers brushing the heat of his skin, and felt the spark, instinctive, electric, a bridge of empathy that warmed the void she had cultivated for years. Kyle's breath hitched, not from pain, but from the unexpected gentleness, his gray eyes locking onto hers with a vulnerability that peeled back the layers of his kingly armor. "Your hands. They carry more than mercy," he whispered, voice barely above the fire's snap. "I feel it, like roots seeking light in frozen soil." Aurea's pulse thundered, the scar on her collarbone aching as if the silver ropes tightened anew. She wanted to deny it, to retreat into the solitude that had been her salvation, but the howls crested closer, rattling the temple's bones. Shadows flickered beyond the fissures in the walls, eyes gleaming yellow in the moonlight, forms slinking low, their growls a guttural chant that reeked of dark enchantment. The wraiths' thralls, twisted wolves bound to the invader's will, their fur matted with frost and malice. "Stay down," she commanded, rising with a fluid grace born of survival's forge. The power stirred unbidden, a silver thread uncoiling in her veins, not yet unleashed but humming like the temple's runes. Kyle nodded, drawing a dagger from his boot, its blade etched with the same crescents as his torque, a relic of oaths unbroken. He positioned himself beside her, shoulder to shoulder in the narrow alcove, his presence a steady anchor amid the rising storm. The first thrall lunged through a breach, a hulking beast with eyes like voids, jaws foaming with unnatural venom. Aurea met it not with claws, but with will, her gift flaring just enough to hurl it back against the stone, the impact echoing like thunder in the chamber. Snow exploded in a white plume, and the creature yelped, bones cracking under the invisible force. Kyle struck next, his dagger slicing true, spilling black ichor that sizzled on the floor. Together, they held the line, her power shielding as he carved through the onslaught, two exiles forging a fragile bulwark against the night. As the last thrall fell, whimpering into silence, the temple fell quiet once more, save for their ragged breaths and the fire's steady roar. Aurea sank to her knees, exhaustion pulling at her like the tide. But in Cale's gaze, she saw not fear of her strength, but recognition, a mirror to his own buried burdens. Empathy bloomed there, tentative and raw, transforming the instinct of survival into something deeper, a bond woven from shared defiance. He reached out, his hand covering hers on the dagger's hilt, the warmth of his touch a quiet promise amid the blood and embers. Yet, as the moon wheeled higher, casting its silver judgment over the ruins, Aurea felt the dilemma stir. To bind herself to this king meant risking the beast's full awakening, trading isolation's peace for a destiny that could redeem or destroy them both. In the fire's glow, his guilt mirrored her shame, whispering that strength lay not in solitude, but in the mercy of standing unguarded. The wind sighed outside, carrying the faint uivo of retreating shadows, but the true storm brewed within, choice, unyielding as the frost. The embers in the brazier guttered low, their orange glow a fragile ward against the encroaching dark, as Aurea withdrew her hand from Cale's grasp. The dagger's hilt still thrummed with residual warmth, slick with the black residue of the fallen thralls. But it was the echo of his touch that lingered, a steady pulse against her skin, unraveling the threads of her solitude. She rose, turning from him to pace the chamber's edge, where moonlight pooled like spilled mercury on the snow-dusted floor. The temple's walls, scarred by the skirmish, bore fresh gouges, the stone weeping faint trickles of meltwater that carried the acrid scent of ichor and frost. Outside, the wind's howl softened to a mournful sigh, as if the night itself exhaled in wary relief. But Aurea felt no ease. The power within her, that coiled beast she had starved for years, now stirred with insistent hunger, its silver light flickering at the periphery of her vision like distant lightning. Cale watched her, propped against the furs, his wound bound tightly with the remnants of her cloak. The bloodroot stain on his bandages bloomed darker, a vivid echo of her own marked palms, binding their fates in crimson script. His gray eyes, shadowed by the fire's dance, held a quiet intensity, not of command, but of dawning wonder, the melancholy king glimpsing something sacred in the ruins. "You wield it like a secret storm," he said, his voice a low rumble that cut through the chamber's hush. "Not brute force, but a shield woven from will alone. The elders spoke of such gifts in the old scrolls, pathfinders, born under the blood moon, guardians who bent the veil between realms. I thought them myth, lost to the goddess's wrath." Aurea halted, her back to him, fingers curling into fists until her nails drew fresh beads of blood. The scar at her collarbone burned, Silver's ghost igniting under the lunar pull, a reminder of the pack's verdict. Monster, not guardian. She had suppressed it, this gift, burying it deeper than the temple's roots to buy the illusion of peace. Isolation had been her mercy, to herself, to the world that feared her uncontrolled surge. But now, with the thrall's venom still tainting the air, the power uncoiled further, a warm tide rising in her veins, responding to the fractures she sensed beyond the borders. Distant tremors rippled through the earth, faint as a heartbeat, carrying whispers of chaos, the capital's spires under siege, shadows breaching the wards like ink spilling across parchment. The unseen enemy Cale had fled, rival alphas twisted by forbidden sorcery, now clawed at the realm's heart, their dark rites unraveling the lunar bonds that held the north intact. She turned, meeting his gaze, the firelight carving hollows in her cheeks. "Myths do not bleed," she whispered, voice laced with the raw edge of old wounds. They called it a curse, drove me out for the lives it nearly claimed. What makes you think it's anything but ruin? Yet even as doubt spilled from her lips, the gift manifested unbidden. A subtle glow emanating from her skin, silver filaments threading the air like frost-laced webs. It was no wild outburst, but a revelation intimate and inexorable, as if the goddess herself exhaled through her breath. The chamber's runes ignited in response, pulsing with ethereal light that chased the lingering shadows, illuminating Kale's face in stark relief. His breath caught, eyes widening not in fear, but in the quiet awe of a man who had lost faith in destinies. Kale pushed to his feet, ignoring the pull of his wound, and stepped closer, the torque at his throat catching the glow like a captured star. The air between them hummed, charged with the scent of ozone and pine, the wind outside picking up as if echoing the surge. "Because I see it now," he murmured, his hand hovering near hers, not touching, but bridging the space with unspoken reverence. "You are the key, Aurea Bloodroot, the Pathfinder foretold in the Silver Crown prophecies. Not a beast, but the shield that will guard the realm when all else crumbles. My flight was no cowardice. It was to find you, guided by dreams of silver light amid the snow. The enemy poisons the borders, twisting our own into thralls, but your power. It calls to the moon's true fire, mending what sorcery breaks." The words struck her like a gale, stirring the dormant force into full awakening. Aurea gasped as visions flooded her mind, not her own memories, but the realm's pulse. The capital's frozen walls besieged, wolves turning on kin under enchanted moons, blood freezing in veins before it could spill. Her gift extended beyond the temple, instinct driving it outward like roots seeking water, a vast shield of silver light unfurling invisibly, arcing over the distant peaks to envelop the heartlands. She felt it manifest, a visceral extension of her will, the energy drawing from her blood's deep well, warm and draining, painting the night sky with an aurora of protection. Snowflakes halted mid-fall outside the breaches, suspended in luminous veils, while howls of confusion rose from the encroaching packs, their advance halted by the ethereal barrier. Kale's hand finally closed over hers, grounding her as dizziness pulled at the edges. His touch was anchor and spark, guilt in his eyes yielding to a fragile hope, the king's melancholy fracturing under the weight of redemption's possibility. "You shield us all," he breathed, voice thick with the era's burdens. "But at what cost to the one who bears it? The prophecies speak of sacrifice. The Pathfinder's light burns brightest in solitude, yet dims alone." Aurea trembled, the power receding like a tide, leaving her hollowed, the scar throbbing with renewed fire. The revelation was no triumph, but a dilemma etched in silver and blood. To embrace this destiny meant forsaking the isolation that had saved her, binding her strength to a king whose crown demanded more than she had ever given. Mercy or power? The moon watched, unblinking, as the wind carried faint cheers from the far-off capital. Prayers now whispering her name, the exile's curse twisting into salvation's blade. In Kale's gaze, she saw her own fractured reflection. Strength is choice, not chain, yet the path ahead gleamed with the peril of hearts entwined. The temple groaned softly, as if the stones themselves pondered the cost of light, reborn from shadow. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw your. The moon's silver gaze pierced the temple's fractured dome like a judgment long deferred, casting elongated shadows that danced with the ember's dying breath. Aurea stood at the chamber's threshold, the weight of her awakened power settling into her bones like frost after a thaw. Heavy, unyielding, a mantle she had never sought. The vast shield she had woven over the realm hummed faintly in her veins, its ethereal barrier holding the shadows at bay, but the cost gnawed at her core. exhaustion that blurred the edges of her vision, and a vulnerability that stripped her isolation bare. Cale remained near the brazier, his form a silhouette of quiet resolve, the torque at his throat glinting as he bound his wound tighter, his gray eyes fixed on her with a mix of awe and unspoken apology. The air between them thickened with the scent of charred ichor and melting snow, the wind outside murmuring secrets of the chaos her light had stilled. Yet peace was a fleeting illusion. The ground trembled beneath the ruins, a low rumble that vibrated through the stone like the realm's own pulse, quickening in dread. Distant howls swelled into a chorus, not the thrall's guttural snarls, but the unified cry of a pack laced with the sharp tang of familiarity that twisted Oria's gut. Her pack. The ones who had bound her with silver and cast her into this exile, their voices now threading through the night like accusations reborn. She stepped into the breach, the cold wind lashing her face with icy needles, and peered into the forest's white-veiled depths. Figures emerged from the tree line, silhouettes against the lunar glow. Wolves in furred cloaks, their breaths clouding the air, eyes reflecting the moon's cold fire. At their forefront strode Thorn, her former alpha, his frame broad and unscarred, the rival who had risen in her wake, his pelt marked with the fresh brands of ambition. Beside him slunk Elowen, the beta who had whispered the lies that sealed Oria's fate, the traitor whose envy had painted her gift as monstrosity. Oria's scar burned fiercely, the silver's echo igniting as memories flooded her. The fire-lit clearing, Thorn's hardening gaze as he declared her unfit, Elowen's sly murmurs twisting defense into savagery. They had come not for reconciliation, but for reckoning. The border's breach had shattered their borders too, the unseen enemy's sorcery infiltrating their ranks, turning kin against kin. Now, with the capital whispering her name in desperate prayer, they sought the beast they had banished, their steps crunching over the snow like judgments etched in frost. Kyle moved to her side, his presence a steady warmth against the encroaching chill, dagger in hand but held low, not in threat. "They come for you," he murmured, voice gravel rough with the king's weary insight. "The prophecies stir old fears. Forgive them, or let the war claim what mercy denies." His words hung, a moral crossroads illuminated by the moon's unblinking eye, forcing Oria to confront the fracture in her soul. Freedom in solitude, or love's precarious bridge. Forgiveness as the blade that could sever or bind. Thorn halted at the temple's outer ring, his pack fanning out like shadows under the pines, their howls fading to a tense silence broken only by the wind's sigh. His eyes, once soft with unfulfilled promise, now gleamed with calculated hunger, the rival alpha who had claimed her place, only to watch his fold crumble under the invader's curse. "Oria Bloodroot," he called, voice carrying the timbre of authority reclaimed, edged with the bitterness of necessity. "The moon reveals what exile hid. Your curse shields the realm, but it was our blood that fed it first. Return and lead us against the darkness, or stay and let the pack's sins consume you alone." Elowen stepped forward, her lithe form cloaked in gray, the traitor's gaze darting with feigned remorse, though Oria scented the lie beneath. Ambitions wrought, the same that had driven her to fabricate tales of Oria's uncontrolled rage during that fateful hunt. "We were wrong," Elowen said, words smooth as oiled hide, but her eyes betrayed the calculation. The pack's survival now hinged on the monster they had forged. "The enemy twists our minds, turns brothers to thralls. Your light. It calls us back. Forgive, sister, and fight with us, or wage war on those who birthed you." The pack murmured, a wave of uneasy pleas rippling through the snow, their forms shifting restlessly under the lunar wash. Blood scented the air anew, not from wounds, but from the ritual cuts they bore, crimson lines drawn across palms in offering to the goddess, echoing Oria's own bloodroot stains. The temple's runes pulsed in response, silver light weaving through the cracks, illuminating the moral chasm. Forgiveness could mend the pack's fractures, weaving her power into their fold for a united stand against the sorcery that poisoned the borders. But it meant yielding freedom, chaining her gift to Thorn's command, risking the love budding with Kale, a redemption that demanded she forgive the very hands that had scarred her. War, then, would be her liberty, unleashing the beast fully, shattering the traitors and rivals in a storm of silver fury, claiming Solitude's cold throne but dooming the realm to deeper shadows. Oria's heart thundered, the power surging like fire in her blood, warm and wild, begging release. She felt Kyle's hand brush her arm, not gripping, but offering. A choice between the king's quiet compassion, his guilt mirroring her shame, and the pack's desperate grasp. Love was no reward, but a trial. To choose him meant war with her past, forgiveness as the forge that tempered strength into mercy. The wind howled, carrying uivos of the distant siege, the capital's spires trembling under the enemy's advance, her shield straining against the onslaught. "I am no beast to leash," Oria declared, her voice rising like the moon's arc, steady despite the tremor in her limbs. The silver light flared from her skin, arcing outward to encircle the pack, not in attack, but in restraint. A barrier that held them at bay, forcing confrontation without immediate blood. Thorn snarled, lunging against the veil, his claws scraping futilely at the luminous weave, while Elowen's eyes widened in betrayal's sting. The pack shifted, torn between awe and fury, their howls fracturing into pleas and threats. Kale stepped forward, his presence amplifying her resolve, the torque gleaming as he addressed them. "The Pathfinder stands not for one fold, but for the realm's heart. Betray her again, and the goddess's judgment falls on you all." His words carried the weight of his crown's guilt, the lives he had failed, now redeemed through her light, but Oria saw the dilemma in his gaze. To bind with her meant forsaking his throne's isolation, choosing love's war over solitary duty. As the pack recoiled, the earth quaked again, fissures cracking the snow like veins of doubt. Oria's power held, but the strain pulled at her, blood welling from her palms where nails had bitten deep, dripping scarlet onto the white to steam and bind. Forgiveness or war? The choice loomed, visceral as the cold seeping into her bones, the moon bearing witness to the ethical precipice. Mercy could crown the fallen, weaving exile into destiny's tapestry, or freedom's blade could sever ties, leaving only the echo of what might have been. In Kale's steady eyes, she glimpsed the path's dual edge, love as redemption's proof, demanding she confront the past, not with vengeance, but with the strength to choose compassion amid the gathering storm. The wind wailed its dirge, the temple stones groaning under the burden, as Oria stood at the fulcrum, her heart a battlefield where blood and silver forged the realm's fragile hope. The silver veil of Oria's power shimmered like frost-kissed silk, holding the pack at the temple's ragged edge, their forms blurred in the lunar haze, a wall of light that separated exile from reckoning, mercy from the blade's cold kiss. The wind clawed through the pines, carrying the sharp bite of their unease, mingled with the metallic undercurrent of ritual blood from their offered palms. Oria's own hands trembled, crimson rivulets tracing her skin where the power had drawn its toll, each drop hissing faintly against the snow as if the earth itself drank her resolve. The scar at her collarbone pulsed with silver fire, a living echo of the ropes that had bound her, now twisting into a beacon that illuminated the chasm within. To forgive was to invite chains anew, yet war's fury promised only the hollow throne of solitude, her gift a storm that would consume the realm she had unwittingly shielded. Thorn's snarl reverberated through the barrier, his massive frame straining against the luminous weave, claws raking futile furrows in the air that sparked like struck flint. His eyes, once a harbor for her unspoken dreams, now burned with the rival's unquenched hunger, the alpha who had seized her place, only to watch his ambition curdle under the enemy's sorcery. "You dare stand against your blood?" he roared, voice fracturing the night's hush, laced with the desperation of a leader whose pack teetered on betrayal's brink. Elowen flanked him, her gray cloak whipping in the gusts, the traitor's face a mask of contrived sorrow that cracked under the moon's scrutiny, revealing the envy that had festered into poison. The pack shifted behind them, a restless tide of fur and frost-rimed breath, their howls reduced to whimpers as the silver light probed their souls, exposing the threads of dark enchantment woven by the border invaders, whispers of doubt that turned kin to foes. Kale's presence anchored her, his shoulder brushing hers in silent solidarity, the warmth of him a counterpoint to the cold seeping into her marrow. His guilt, etched in the lines of his face, mirrored her fracture, the king's melancholy, a quiet storm that had driven him from the capital's crumbling spires, where he had failed to stem the sorcery's tide. Now, in this forsaken sanctum, his hand rested lightly on the dagger's hilt, not drawn but ready, his gray eyes scanning the pack with the measured compassion of one who knew the weight of fallen oaths. "The goddess tests us all," he said softly, his breath clouding the air between them, carrying the faint smoke of the dying brazier. "Your choice shapes not just the night, but the dawn that follows. Forgive, and weave the light into unity. Refuse, and let the shadows claim what mercy might have saved." Oria's heart hammered, a visceral drum echoing the distant quakes from the besieged heartlands, where her shield strained against the onslaught of twisted legions. Visions flickered at the edges of her mind, the capital's icy towers aglow with her silver aura, wolves frozen mid-lunge as the sorcery recoiled, but cracks forming in the barrier, fed by the drain of her blood. To unleash fully would shatter the pack before her, purging the traitors in a cataclysm of force, reclaiming her freedom in isolation's embrace. Yet Thorn's gaze held a fractured plea, the alpha's pride yielding to the realm's peril, and Elowen's whispers, once venomous, now carried the tremor of genuine fear, the beta haunted by the thralls she had seen claim her own kin. Forgiveness loomed as the harder path, not absolution without cost, but a moral forge, binding her power to the pack's redemption, intertwining her fate with Kale's, in a union that demanded vulnerability over dominion. The earth groaned again, deeper this time, snow cascading from the temple's arches in white avalanches that muffled the pack's murmurs. A rift spidered across the frozen ground, exhaling plumes of spectral mist, the enemy's sorcery probing the ruins, tendrils of shadow coiling like smoke from unseen fissures. One lashed toward Thorn, black as void, twisting his form in agony as it sought to claim him fully, his howl twisting into a guttural keen that pierced Oria's core. Instinct surged, her gift uncoiling like roots through frozen soil, silver light flaring brighter to sever the tendril in a burst of ethereal fire. Thorn staggered, collapsing to his knees, the enchantment's grip broken, his eyes clearing to reveal the raw shame of near loss. In that breath, the choice crystallized, sharp as bloodroot's edge. Oria extended her will, the barrier softening not to yield, but to envelop, silver filaments threading through the pack like veins of moonlight, drawing out the sorcery's poison in wisps of dark vapor that dissipated on the wind. Pain lanced through her, a burning tide that pulled fresh blood from her pores, staining the snow in intricate patterns that steamed and bound, the goddess's ink rewriting exile into alliance. The pack gasped, bodies arching as the light purged them, Elowen's form shuddering as truths spilled from her lips unbidden. I lied. Envy blinded me. Forgive the shadow I cast. Thorn rose slowly, his snarl fading to a bowed head, the rival's ambition humbled by the mercy that spared him. Kale's hand found hers amid the glow, fingers interlacing with a gentleness that spoke of shared burdens lifted, his touch a bridge from guilt to hope. The union stirred, not as immediate flame, but as embers kindled in frost. Love's proof in the choice to heal rather than destroy. Redemption's quiet fire amid the blood and cold. Yet as the pack knelt in the snow, their howls rising in unified reverence, Oria felt the shield over the realm pulse stronger, mending under the weight of forgiven sins. The wind hushed, the moon wheeling toward zenith, but the true trial lingered. Sacrifice's shadow, where power's cost demanded one final yielding, the heart's freedom traded for the realm's rebirth. In Kale's gaze, steady as ancient stone, she glimpsed the path's completion, compassion crowning the fallen, weaving beast and king into destiny's unyielding weave. The temple stood sentinel, its stones warm now with latent light as the night exhaled toward dawn's fragile promise. The dawn's first blush bled through the temple's fractured dome, a hesitant crimson threading the silver haze of Oria's lingering light, as if the sky itself wept for the night's forged alliances. The pack knelt in the snow-swept clearing, their forms bowed under the weight of purged shadows, breath sinking in ragged harmony with the wind's fading dirge. Thorn's broad shoulders slumped, the rival Alpha's pride dissolved into quiet submission. His eyes, once hardened by ambition, now reflecting the moon's receding glow with a vulnerability that mirrored Oria's own unearthed scars. Eloan huddled nearby, her gray cloak dusted white, the traitor's confessions hanging in the air like frost-kissed vapor, her hands clasped in bloodied supplication. The sorcery's tendrils had uncoiled from their veins, expelled in wisps of acrid smoke that the breeze scattered toward the pines, leaving behind the raw ache of truths laid bare. Yet the realm's pulse thrummed through Oria's core, a visceral drumbeat of distant sieges where her shield frayed at the edges, the silver barrier straining against the invader's unrelenting tide. She stood at the threshold, Kale's hand still entwined with hers, his fingers a steady anchor amid the power's ebb, a warmth that seeped into her chilled flesh, kindling embers where isolation had long reigned. The king's melancholy gaze met hers, etched with the guilt of thrones forsaken, but softened now by the fragile hope of shared redemption. His torque gleamed dully in the emerging light, a relic of duties he had borne alone, until this exile's light had revealed the prophecy's weave, not solitary crowns, but hearts entwined to mend what sorcery shattered. Love had not bloomed as instant fire, but as roots pushing through frozen earth, resisted in her fears of chains, rationalized as mere survival's pact, and now inexorably accepted as the proof that strength lay in yielding, not dominion. The ground quaked once more, deeper and more insistent, fissures widening like wounds in the snow to exhale plumes of dark ether. The enemy's heart, a sorcerous nexus buried in the borderlands, pulsing with malice that clawed at the realm's wards. Oria felt it pull at her gift, the silver shield over the capital buckling as visions assaulted her, spires crumbling under enchanted onslaughts, wolves twisted into thralls once more, blood freezing in rivers before it could nourish the earth. The drain intensified, her vision blurring as the power drew from her essence, blood welling anew from her palms and the silver-scarred collarbone, dripping in scarlet rivulets that steamed against the frost. She staggered, the light flickering like a candle in gale. Her body a vessel pushed to the precipice, Sacrifice's shadow looming, where the Pathfinder's fire could consume her wholly to save the many. Kale's arm encircled her waist, pulling her against his chest, the rhythm of his heart a counterpoint to the chaos. "Not alone," he murmured, voice gravel rough with the king's unyielding ethic, his breath warm against her temple. "The crown's guilt taught me isolation's lie. Redemption demands union, mercy's blade shared." His free hand pressed to her bloodied palm, mingling their warmth, and in that touch, the bond ignited fully. Not command, but choice, his melancholy yielding to the compassion that had drawn him from the throne. The pack rose as one, Thorn stepping forward with bowed head, his voice a low rumble of atonement. "We forged your chains. Let us bear the light now." Elowyn nodded, her eyes clear of envy, offering a ritual dagger, its blade etched with lunar sigils, a symbol of oaths remade. Oria drew a shuddering breath, the wind whipping her hair like spectral fingers, carrying the distant uivos of the besieged. A chorus pleading her name. The exile once cursed now invoked as savior. The choice crystallized, not as war's fury or forgiveness's fragile truce, but as rebirth's forge. To unleash the beast fully meant her end, the silver storm purging the nexus, but leaving her a hollow shell, free yet forever alone. Or to heal through union, weaving her power with the Pack's and Kyle's will, demanding she surrender the isolation's armor for love's vulnerable weave, a moral precipice where compassion triumphed over power, destiny claimed not as chain, but as liberated faith. She knelt in the snow, the Pack encircling her like guardians reborn, their palms slicing open in unison to spill blood onto the earth, crimson blooming in intricate patterns that resonated with her own stains, the goddess's ink-binding rejection into Renascimento. Kyle knelt beside her, his wounds ache forgotten in the ritual's pull, his gray eyes locking with hers in silent vow. "Choose us," he whispered, the words a tether against the void. Oria nodded, the power surging not as solitary blaze but as shared tide, silver light exploding outward in a radiant cascade that arced through the realm like veins of moonlight. It pierced the borders, roots of will delving into the sorceress heart, drawing the darkness forth, not in cataclysm, but in meticulous purge, the invader's nexus unraveling thread by thread as the Pack's chants rose, harmonious and raw, amplifying her gift with their mended loyalties. Pain lanced through her, a white-hot forge that blurred the world to silver and blood, her body arching as the drain peaked. Visions of the capital's salvation flashing, shields mending, thralls reverting to kin, the frozen rivers thawing under lunar grace. She teetered on oblivion's edge, the beast's fire threatening to claim her. But Kale's embrace held firm, his will intertwining with hers like gold and silver alloy, his guilt transmuted into strength that bolstered the light. The Pack's blood fed the weave, Thorn's atonement a bulwark, Elowyn's truth a spark, their unity the mercy that crowned her fall. The nexus shattered in a distant thunder, shadows dissipating like mist before dawn, the realm exhaling in collective relief as howls of triumph echoed from the peaks. Oria collapsed against Kale, the power receding in gentle waves, leaving her hollowed yet whole. Reborn not in isolation's cold throne, but in the warmth of bonds reforged. The scar at her collarbone cooled, silver threads now pulsing with harmony rather than burn, a mark of trials transcended. The Pack gathered close, Thorn offering a furred cloak with reverent hands, Elowyn murmuring prayers of renewal, their faces alight with the dawn's gold. Kale lifted her chin, his lips brushing her forehead in a kiss soft as falling snow. Love accepted, not as reward, but as the ultimate proof, redemption's flame kindled in the heart's quiet surrender. As the sun crested the mountains, bathing the temple in amber, Oria rose with them, the wind whispering benedictions through the pines. The beast was no curse, but the goddess's call answered, exile, a forge for the shield that had saved them all. In Kale's steady gaze, she saw the future's weave, union's trials ahead, yet tempered by compassion's enduring light. The realm stirred anew, blood and silver entwined in destiny's tapestry, where mercy had crowned the fallen, and love proved the soul's truest rebirth. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.